Hello everyone, I'm Kyle Gluth. I'm a firefighter here with the City of Waukesha Fire Department, and today we're going to talk about ventilation. So the objective of today's training is to not only understand the different types of these two ventilations, which we're going to go over negative pressure and also positive pressure, but then be able to demonstrate effectively using those techniques once we go through the second portion. So just for an introduction and a little bit about ventilation, it's the controlled and coordinated removal of heat and smoke from a structure. It replaces escaping gases with cooler, cleaner, and oxygen-rich air. It must be planned and systematic. So obviously that last part is very critical, and one of the main reasons is it's introducing that oxygen-rich air. So we need to make sure that we are planning and coordinated with the people that are working inside and make sure that we don't make things worse than actually make them better. So the effects of ventilation: it helps remove hot gases from the fire compartment. It makes it easier to locate the seat of the fire. That's mainly by this next one, improving the visibility. And it contributes to faster and safer knockdowns, more effective fire suppression, improved efficiency of the searching, obviously again with that visibility, and then it quickly adds oxygen to a fire if performed or timed poorly. So that's another key one. So obviously most of the other things are positives in our firefighting, but this one can become a negative if we don't time it properly. So the first of the two we're going to talk about is negative pressure ventilation. So negative pressure uses a smoke ejector to exhaust the products of combustion out through a window or a door. Smoke ejectors create negative pressure that actually draw the heat and smoke and fire gases out of the building instead of pushing them through. They're usually around 16 to 24 inches in diameter and can be powered by electricity, gasoline, or even water pressure. Negative pressure ventilation can be used to clear smoke out of the structure after a fire, particularly if natural ventilation would be too slow or if there's no natural cross ventilation existing in that structure. Usually it's associated with horizontal ventilation, but can be used in a roof vent opening if there's heat and smoke in an attic space that you need to get rid of. Negative pressure ventilation's limitations: one is positioning. You have to have a power source generally. The maintenance of the machines, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later, but the maintenance they're referring to is the fact that these superheated gases and stuff are actually passing through those fans. So there's a little bit more cleaning than some of the other options that we have. And then airflow control. It's a little bit more difficult to control the airflow when we're working with these. Smoke ejectors usually have explosion-proof motors, which is obviously a great thing, which makes them excellent choices for use with venting flammable or combustible gases. So when we're going to use a negative pressure ventilation fan, we need to determine the area to be ventilated and the direction of the outside wind. That outside wind becomes very critical. We need to place that ejector so that it is on the upwind side of the building. Obviously, if it's not, we're going to be fighting the natural forces and may be pretty ineffective. After that, many companies will actually have a bar like this right with that fan, and you lock it up into that opening, and then you can actually use hangers to hang that fan from it. Most of these are already set up like that, so a pretty easy, quick setup. Sometimes you can use a salvage cover to actually help encompass that opening so that you don't have air recirculating when you're trying to just get it all to be forced out of that area. You also want to provide an opening on that upwind side of the structure to help get that cross ventilation working well. So next we're going to move on to the positive pressure ventilation. So positive pressure ventilation uses large, powerful fans to force fresh air into a structure. They're usually set up at exterior doorways, often in the same opening that the attack team uses to make entry. You must provide an outlet or an exhaust opening to release that positive pressure. Obviously, we're forcing a bunch of air in. We need to make that opening where it's going to exhaust out of. The exhaust is that point where we're calling the ventilation opening. It will not work effectively if the building is not intact. So one of the things I think about when we talk about the building being intact is very old school thought process was break out every window when we arrive on scene to get that ventilation going. If something like that has happened, it's not going to be as effective for ventilating that actual fire room or that area where the fire is located where members are working. The force and the direction of the wind need to be taken into consideration. Again, like we talked about with the negative pressure, if we have wind blowing into the window that we're trying to exhaust out of, it's not going to be very effective. It's actually going to cause us some problems. And a very large structure can be vented by placing multiple fans side by side. You can also do things like in series. We've actually had to do it on commercial buildings where we've placed multiple fans at that opening, and then we've also had to place fans further in a series to kind of help boost that air again. Some advantages of positive pressure ventilation are it can be set up by one firefighter very quickly. Firefighters not have to enter the hazardous atmosphere like you do with a negative pressure fan, obviously putting that at the exhaust point. It's quick and efficient, it can help confine the fire, it increases safety, and it does not require as much cleaning and maintenance, and the main reason for that again is you're pushing that air in, you're not actually ventilating it out, having those gases and stuff pass through the fan itself. Some of the disadvantages are it may spread the fire if used improperly. Kind of talked about this and hinted at this right away, but if we're forcing all that air in, we don't have a proper opening, or we're not getting water on the fire and not prepared for it, it can actually cause that fire to travel. We're basically feeding that fire that oxygen-rich atmosphere. It's very noisy. Communications get to be difficult when using these, especially if you're in any close proximity to it, and it may increase carbon monoxide levels. Hot motors are unsafe to use when flammable or combustible vapors are present, and some fans will not start if tipped down when getting off the apparatus. So the thing they're getting at with this is all these new style engines have the oil shutoffs on them so that if we're running low on oil, they don't burn the motor up and keep running. So they'll have these sensors on there that actually protect it. But if something tips over, it takes a while for that to reset itself so that we can then use that fan. It might render it unavailable for a little bit of time. Just want to go back to the increase in carbon monoxide levels. Obviously in a structure fire type setting, it's not something we're super concerned about. But if we're doing more of a CO call, a natural gas call where we're trying to get some ventilation, it can kind of be counterproductive by running that fan with its exhaust, putting it right back into the building. We actually, on a lot of our rigs, we've had tubes that we actually can put onto those exhaust outlets and run them away so that we're not drawing that air right back in. We also do now have electric PPV fans, which is a great thing. They just do not put out the CFMs that the gas ones do, so they're just not quite that great yet. Positive pressure ventilation, you place the fan in the front of the opening to be used for the fire attack. The exact position depends on the size of the opening and the size of the fan and the direction of the wind. So when they're talking about that, they're talking about the distance, how close it is to the door, the angle you're going to tilt the fan at. Most of these have an adjustable thing that you can just put your foot on and kind of get a different angle of that cone that we're going to talk about here. So you need to provide an exhaust opening at the fire room or as close to it as possible. We obviously don't want to make that fire travel anymore if we don't have that exhaust opening right where it needs to be. This opening can be made either before the fan is started or when the fan is started. You don't want to do it too long before you have that fan. A lot of times we'll have the fan running, you'll make that opening, and then you can actually turn the fan in. But we don't want to be trying to start a fan after we get that opening and we're not ready. We're starting to feed that fire, or that more oxygen to that fire again. So the main thing is you start the fan, check the cone that is produced. It should be completely cover the opening. So like I was talking about that positioning, you can actually feel with your hand and feel where that cone is, and we need to make sure it's covering that complete opening so that we're not only covering half of it and it's just circulating that air right back out. And then you want to monitor the exhaust only to ensure there is an unidirectional flow. We want to allow the smoke to clear, and that's about what it takes. So just to give a review, obviously we've went over it pretty quickly. We're going to go to a hands-on portion now where we get our hands on, look at the fans themselves, and make sure we can operate them effectively. But we should be able to understand the differences between the two, how they work, why they work, and at the end of the second portion we'll be able to demonstrate effectively how to use both fans. Again, my name's Kyle. Give me some feedback, any questions, let me know, and we'll move out to the second portion where we're going to get our hands on the stuff.